Susan, ¿qué es la herida del abandono?
Abandonment wound, I really mean the universal primal wound, the fear of loss, the fear of disconnection. And then it's tied up with shame in the sense that abandonment is the fear of disconnection in a relationship. Shame is the fear that you're not worthy of the connection. So,
¿Y cómo se trabaja?
but there are tools that actually take the energy, abandonment recovery tools, that actually take the energy and move the energy toward the self. And the essential way that they work,
Hoy estoy muy emocionada de compartirte la entrevista con una de mis autores favoritas, Susan Anderson. Si eres seguidor de mi canal, seguro te suena este nombre. Susan Anderson, psicoterapeuta, ha dedicado más de 30 años de experiencia clínica e investigaciones en trabajar con víctimas del trauma del abandono. Fundadora de los movimientos de recuperación del abandono y del niño exterior, es autora de bestsellers como Del abandono a la sanación, Journey from Abandonment to Healing, The Abandonment Recovery Workbook, Taming Your Outer Child y The Black Swan 12 Lessons of Abandonment Recovery. A través de su sitio web, talleres, grabaciones y medios de comunicación, comparte sus métodos con víctimas de trauma de abandono, desamor y pérdida en todo el mundo. También nos acompaña Ibeaa, asistente de Susan. Ella ha sido parte activa de la comunidad de recuperación del abandono desde el 2020. Cofacilita y participa en talleres en línea y ayuda a establecer grupos de apoyo para quienes buscan crecimiento y sanación después de una ruptura o con heridas de abandono. Habiendo experimentado de primera mano el poder de transformación del programa Recuperación del Abandono, siente una gran pasión por apoyar a otros en su camino. Vamos allá.
Thank you so much, Susan, for being here. And Ibeaa too. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Your work has been very influential in my practice, in my YouTube channel, in everything that I have. Your book is one of my favorite books that I have, and I'm really inspired about your journey, Susan. So thank you so much for being here. I want to ask you, what inspired you to make abandonment recovery a focus of your life's work?
well, I was a therapist at the time that this happened to me, that I was abandoned. I was a therapist for 20 years at the time, and I specialized in separation anxiety. When I say specialized, I mean it was kind of the way I viewed people and their anxiety, that people were basically suffering from separation anxiety of some sort. It's very related to the attachment concept. And then all of a sudden, the love of my life, my husband of 20 years, and we were so madly in love, he just left me suddenly for another woman. And I was devastated, so devastated, that I discovered that my own tools, my own expertise was not sufficient. I needed more. So I was barely surviving the abandonment, but I started researching and found out very interesting and important things about recovery from researching, not psychology. Psychology and self-help didn't really have anything for that abandonment, that primal pain. And they didn't use the word abandonment hardly ever. I mean, it was a very understudied concept. So I started doing research into animal psychology, neurobiology, other fields. And I was able to find research data that supported a way of recovering from abandonment. I began to find little threads that I was able to put together, because recovering from such a thing without leaving an enormous scar is quite a challenge. So I made that discovery, and I was so happy to have it to share with people that I wrote books about it, and I've been helping people for the past 25 years in this
Yes.
recovery program.
Yeah, and it's so valuable to know that you went through it, and then it comes from also your personal journey, your experience, and then you flushed out all of that from this. So I think your experience has been a light for so many people.
Yes.
So
I
yeah.
knew it too. I knew that I was experiencing something universal. It
Yes.
wasn't just
Mhm.
me. I was
Mhm.
experiencing something that brought me to my knees. And I knew that if it did that to me, that
Mhm.
it did that to other people too. But it wasn't
Everybody.
talked about because
Yes.
the amount of devastation is so extreme that you feel ashamed to admit it.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. And I
Especially
love.
men. Men go through this just
Uh-huh.
as badly as
Uh-huh.
women. They are
Yeah.
so devastated. They can hardly breathe. They might crawl into a cave and stay
Mhm.
drunk for a month just to
Mhm.
survive the beginning part. But then they
Yes.
still have to deal with it. It's for men and women, it's a devastating experience to go through.
Yes, yes, yes. And you know, I love your descriptive language, your symbolism, because I think that makes people feel very seen and understood. Like going through a breakup is like being separated from your string. It's like an explosion of separateness. It's like an open heart surgery. I love that you use that language because
And
people
I
are
got
really,
that language from
yeah,
my clients, from members of my
yeah,
workshops. And
yeah.
Ibeaa, who's with us here because she's a member of abandonment recovery and a helper and reaches out to people, but she's heard these terms too. But
Mhm.
my workshop members will say things like, it felt like a cannonball was shot through my chest, or I
Yeah.
feel like I'm eating my heart out from the, very extreme expressions. I feel like
Exactly.
someone has poured acid in my body. I feel like shrapnel has exploded inside my body.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
use very extreme terms because they're so used to not being heard,
Mm,
because people just can't seem to empathize with this because the pain is so great and people don't want to remember if they've had this pain themselves. So they
mm.
use very strong language.
Yes, exactly. Very strong language. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And Ibeaa, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey in this recovery or in this or working with clients.
Yes, the first time I worked with abandonment recovery participants was during the pandemic. That was our first online workshop.
Mm,
So I was also going through my own heartbreak at that time. So when Susan told me that she will be, when I saw the outline, I was like so happy because before going through the workshop, moving on or yeah, overcoming heartbreaks, just like burying it deep, like forgetting
yeah.
about it, not talking about it. People
Yeah.
expect us to like move on after 3 days. If you're still crying after a week, you're a loser, right? And
Exactly.
Susan's workshop really helped me, recover from that heartbreak. And I was actually telling her that during the getting into the moment, a Akero exercise,
Yeah.
I was able to sleep like peacefully after several weeks of going through the throes of abandonment. Doing that exercise, like I slept like a baby, like for the
Mm-hmm.
first time. So I was, yeah, that's
Wow.
that's my journey. That's why I'm a strong believer of the abandonment recovery program.
Uh-huh. Thank you. You know, I love that is I could say it's a technique, but it's also like a way of living in the moment, right? And that the first time that I read your book, Susan, also I got stuck that this method of just hearing the sounds, even the forest one, just hear the forest sound that you could hear, just stay with it, and that's one of the methods, one of a part of your programs So yeah.
That's also my favorite, that like actually tuning into the furthest sound you can hear.
Yes, yes. Yes, exactly. So maybe we can get into that more in the interview. I want to ask you also, Susan. So when you say abandonment wound, that somebody is going through an abandonment wound, how would you describe that? What is that?
Well, it's the primal wound. Not everybody has gone through a painful breakup where they're feeling just destroyed. Not everybody has that experience. But we all know that we all carry, it's universal, an abandonment wound that's a part of us that is vulnerable. So by the abandonment wound, I really mean the universal primal wound, the fear of loss, the fear of disconnection. And then it's tied up with shame in the sense that abandonment is the fear of disconnection in a relationship. Shame is the fear that you're not worthy of the connection. So if you feel rejected, then you feel, oh, I could be abandoned because I could be discarded because I'm not important. There's something wrong with me. I'm not enough. I have something wrong with me or whatever. So these are universal, but they don't always have to be so dramatic where you're feeling them. A lot of times they're just little feelings that interfere with your happiness that day. For instance, one of your friends, you call your friend because you'd love to get together, to meet after work. And you call your friend and she doesn't call back. Let's make this a very typical situation. And so, okay, so you try her later and she still doesn't call back. So the next day you say, hey, I've been trying to reach you and you still don't get a call. And she's busy. But a little tiny worry is, well, she doesn't care that much that obviously I need to talk to her and she doesn't care about me the way I care about her. And then, oh no, that's silly. It's just a passing thought. But in that thought, there is that abandonment wound that you're having a little thought, very tiny, that possibly you're not worthy of that connection, that you care more about the person than she cares about you, and that somehow you're not important enough for her to help you, and that she would abandon you in your hour of need. This is all just going through your mind. You barely notice that you're having it. So this abandonment wound is something that sometimes we can hardly feel it, but most people have it, or they're conscious of having it a little bit. There are a few people who have told me, I don't have abandonment. I don't have an abandonment wound, but they really mean that. They just don't have it. But when I say to them, well, it really, these are the different ways it can manifest. It can affect your self-esteem. It can give you a little anxiety. It can make you tend to have performance anxiety where you can't show, all of your worth to the world. It can affect your choices in relationships. It can make you attracted to the unavailable. It can make you look to other people for approval rather than being able to give it to yourself. And I go on and on with a list of things. And then they say, oh, well, yeah, I do have some of that. And then slowly they begin to say, well, I guess I have an abandonment wound. It doesn't affect me very much, but I have an abandonment wound. So once they make that realization, they're doing themselves a favor, because if they can finally say, well, actually, I do have that basic human universal vulnerability right in the center of myself. Once they make that realization, it's an opening. And it's an opening into being more in touch with themselves, more connected to the human race, more aware of human emotion. It's an opening into something positive. Yeah. So I like to present, the abandonment wound as being on a continuum. You can either be in so much pain that you can't get out of bed. You could wind up hospitalized. So many people just break. All the way from that to just having like a feeling of kind of, you don't know why, but you just don't feel great that day. But it's really because when you walked into work, nobody said, "Hi, Caroline." It's like you weren't recognized, and you just feel kind of, you didn't notice, but you just feel kind of unimportant that day. And you don't know why you're not feeling your best. But if you analyzed it, it was something like that.
Yes, I love that, Susan, that there is a continuum. It's not just black or white. I'm going through a breakup or I'm fine. It's just like subtlety, and it's universal in everyone. I think it's also like existential in a way, this void that you have. And a lot of people that are going through a breakup is not just that wound, but is that their body is remembering all the wounds from the past, from their childhood, right? Like you have like a surgeons of a lot of things that you had in the past coming up.
Well, that's why all these little things, big things and little things, are painful. Because let's say you go through a breakup, every single the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, has an emotional memory that has been absorbing, experiences. And so when you go through it, all of your losses, all of the rejections, all of the times people disconnected, all of the disappointments, all of the times that you felt inadequate and that you thought you weren't successful and you thought other people were more successful or did things better than you did, all of those times when you doubted your own worth, all of that comes rushing into that wound.
Yeah.
It all flows right into that moment. That's what makes it feel so exaggerated. And the same is true even when the triggering event was something so small you didn't even notice, such as you walk into work and you say, "Hi, everybody," and they go, and you didn't get acknowledged. You don't even notice it, but you have a slightly lowered mood. Why? Because it triggered very subliminally things that aren't important, but that happen in childhood, maybe, where you were one of three kids and you were kind of the invisible child who very often didn't get recognized or something like that. And as a child, you felt, maybe using very babyish words, you felt, "Oh, no, I'm not special. I'm not important." So, the things, little tiny things in life can trigger feelings that go all the way back. We don't have to remember them. It's not conscious, but they contribute to how we're feeling at any given time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's right. And Susan, you also mentioned in your book something that I have never heard and is so unique about PTSD of abandonment. Right? Some people, is that part of the continuum where some people it's so hard on them that they start experiencing a lot of flashback intrusiveness, or how can you see that in the continuum, or what do you?
I think it does fit in the continuum. Plus, it has its own continuum. And then there are all these different traits, and each one of those is on a continuum because these things go from extreme to very, very minor. But, the reason that I felt the need to come up with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder of abandonment is because those experiences in childhood were traumatic, and in that they affected the emotional brain. They caused some conditioning to occur in the brain, and they have an ongoing impact, which is what trauma is. It's an experience that has an ongoing impact because it affects us and it affects our functioning. So a post-traumatic stress disorder of abandonment is an important diagnosis because a lot of people who are diagnosed with borderline personality, and that's a stigmatized diagnosis. And it's very sad when a person has borderline personality. It's very painful for that person and for that person's family and friends. But a lot of people who have post-traumatic stress disorder of abandonment don't really have borderline, but they're diagnosed because their emotional reactions are so huge and they have breakdowns over things that might seem minor. But that doesn't mean that they're borderline. Borderline takes it a little step further where there's real self-destructive behavior and a lot of narrative, a lot of the person who's having super extreme reactions to other people starts writing a narrative in their mind about why. So let's say you walk in at work and you say, "Hi, everybody," and people ignore you that day. The borderline might think, "Oh, it's because I gave a speech yesterday and everyone's jealous and they've been talking about me behind my back and they've decided that I'm not." And you make up a narrative that never occurred because you're trying to protect your ego. You're feeling so hurt, so inflated that you have to have a story that makes you okay. And it's the reason the people didn't say hello to you is because you were so great the day before that they're jealous of you. Or, you make up some sort of a narrative that protects your ego. Freud used to call that regression in the service of the ego.
Oh,
Where you
wow.
create a sort of a false reality in order to protect your ego. A person with post-traumatic stress disorder might also have a lot of narrative to rationalize a lot of things, but they don't lose their sense of reality. They kind of can have a narrative, but also see it in different ways. So really, I mean, it's kind of on a continuum, the degree of how much the post-traumatic stress disorder of abandonment creates such emotional reactivity. But really, when it reaches the borderline level, that is a specific area that requires specialized treatment, and that person needs so much support. Whereas if it's post-traumatic stress disorder of abandonment, it means that the person needs a great deal of support and a lot of abandonment recovery tools, which help both groups. But it's not quite as devastating, and it's more temporary.
It's more temporary. Okay, I see. Thank you so much for doing that distinction between borderline and PTSD of abandonment. I think that's going to be very helpful for the audience. Yeah. And one of the things that I hear the most with clients and with people going after a breakup or when they are meeting new people and dating is the obsessive thoughts, obsessiveness, rumination, these thought loops of whether if it's a breakup, thinking about the ex-partner all the time, and if it's somebody that is, if they're meeting somebody new, is like that fear of being rejected or not answering the phone, not answering the text messages, and that's one of the biggest things I think people deal with. And how can you help somebody with these obsessive thoughts that they feel they're going crazy? What tools and techniques, and maybe Ibeaa can also chime in, or you, Susan, what can we do with this obsessiveness of thought?
Well, I'm going to answer the obsessiveness part, and maybe Ibeaa can speak to the fact that when you try to start a new relationship, you can be so vulnerable that you freak out very easily. She's not only experienced this herself, I'm sure, but she has had so much exposure over many years to all these people in the workshops and people who write into the website. She's had lots of experience with people who go through that. But I'll speak to the obsessiveness. It's involuntary. There's no switch. So when you're being obsessive, you can't turn a switch. You're stuck with it. And what it is that the mind is searching for its lost object. So this is a John Bowlby concept. He studied Greek. So the mind says, let's say, we're designed, as long as we are hormonal and we have sex hormones, We are designed to seek a partner because our mandate is to procreate and keep the human race going. So it's self and object. It's self and lover, self and husband, self and partner, self and other. So when that other disappears through death or abandonment, the mind says, let's say the person that you're missing is named Jacob. The mind says, where's Jacob? I don't see Jacob. Jacob has to be here. Well, how come there's no Jacob? Oh, it must be because I did something wrong, or Jacob is cheating on me, and I've done. How could this happen? I don't know what. The mind is spooling because it's searching for its lost object. That part of the mind is very object oriented. Object meaning the other person, and can't rest until it figures out, and it never will, because these things are so complicated and confusing, and very often we don't have access to all the information, but it keeps trying to figure it out. And even when it does figure it out, that's not good enough. It has to keep going and spooling. And so it's an involuntary reaction from the brain, the emotional brain. And it's something that is so powerful that we can't turn it off, but we do have tools so that we can take that obsessiveness and transform that into a more positive obsession. You know, when you have a breakup or even a minor incident in your life, as I've been trying to describe this continuum, it could just be nobody said hello to you that day. When you have that, you have thwarted attachment energy. You want you want to be recognized, you want to be loved, you want to be kept, as you don't ever want to be thrown away or discarded. You have, all of this attachment energy. And when you don't get what you need, it's thwarted. And that energy is the pain. That's the pain of abandonment, the thwarting of that energy. That energy can be turned toward the self in a self-loving way. We need that energy. It's valuable energy. So turning that energy toward the self sounds like one of those easier said than done things, turn that energy toward yourself. You should love yourself. Nobody's going to love you unless you learn to love yourself. These things are easy to say, impossible to do, almost impossible. And there are all these, easy remedies like reciting affirmations in the mirror, which can be effective for some people. But there are tools that actually take the energy, abandonment recovery tools, that actually take the energy and move the energy toward the self. And the essential way that they work, and Ibeaa has, seen a lot of this in action, a lot, and she's experienced it. They involve looking at the kid within you that's so hurt, recognizing what's that kid feeling, that little one, the inner child that we all have. What's that kid feeling, and taking that energy, looking for your ex-partner or your other person, and taking that and saying, I want to give that person love. I want to care about that person inside myself, that part of me that is feeling so lonely. And so there are exercises to do that. And now I'm going to let Ibeaa talk to the part about how when you attempt a new relationship, all of that insecurity that's been mounting has an impact. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you've seen so much of it in the work that we do together.
Yes. Actually, I think just a little bit recently, I stopped dating for like 4 years, and then all of a sudden I met someone, and all of these insecure feelings came back. And I'm like, I thought this is already gone. I thought this has disappeared. I was able to overcome it. And then
that's very common.
It does come back if you're not too careful. If you're, because when I after all these workshops, I was like, okay, I'm healed. I'm a better person. And then when you start liking someone, like you can't even control it. And even if that, when you talked about, the brain keeps on looking for that person who left, and even if that person is really like, I don't know what term to use, but probably not good for you. You know logically that the person is not, like useless. But your brain still keeps on looking for that person. Like and as Susan said, there's no switch. So yeah, I and the participants have tried the dialogue, dialoguing with your inner child, and it really, really helps. It helped me and other participants understand the triggers, like why are we feeling this way? Like, for example, there was one time when I was looking for that person who left, and when I talked to the inner me, the little me, I realized I was just overwhelmed. And when I'm overwhelmed, I look for someone to kind of protect me. And then the adult me was able to, assure the little girl that the adult me will always be there to protect her. And yeah, that's how I refocus the energy to myself.
Yeah, because, we all need to develop a better relationship with ourselves, no matter where we're at, me included. But when we find ourselves going through that whole insecurity thing that Ibeaa was describing, and then the other person becomes an obsession, even if we know they're not good for us, we realize, oops, that relationship with myself isn't what it needs to be. And I have to strengthen that and put that relationship back in order. I have to start making myself the object of my own love and devotion. And I have to pay attention to what little me wants and needs. So it's not that it prevents you from being a human being and going through the anxiety and the obsession. You're still a human being. But when you realize, well, oh no, there I am again, then you say, oops, that relationship that I was building with myself needs work. Because my relationship with myself can take care of this. But I need to pay attention to what what I need inside, what my inner needs are, my inner child, what my needs are. And I need to make my adult self that much smarter, that much stronger, that much more responsible.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And I love that both responses and I love that concept of taking all the energy and putting it into yourself. It's like being your primary caretaker instead of your secondary. You become your primary caretaker, right?
Yes, you become that's your primary caretaking responsibility. Yourself. People say love yourself, and it's so nebulous, but that's what it's about. Loving yourself, making that the important thing.
Yeah. And yes, and in your book, and I'm going to link your book here in the description in the video, and at the beginning I'm going to tell more about your book. Del abandono a la sanación, it's in Spanish too. From abandonment to healing, because you talk about these written exercises. So just write whatever your little inner child is saying and what it needs. For that, you need a lot of also self-awareness, I would say, and being able to tolerate the emotions that you have. I think because if you can't tolerate, you can go within and then respond from the bigger you or the adult you. And I have a question in there also. A lot of people that are trying to do this, they could say, I'm trying to connect with the bigger me or to the adult me, but I feel that adult is scared, is unsure, is not giving me the energy of a caretaker. What can people do if they feel that they cannot, tune in to that adult energy?
Well, that you've just asked the question that comes into every workshop. Ibeaa and I have heard that, question many, many times.
Mhm.
And the truth is that a lot of abandonment survivors are very strong adults. I mean, we're a very amazing group of people because we've developed strengths other people don't have because we went through abandonment as children and had fears we had to overcome. So we have more strengths very often than a lot of other people. And we are very high achievers, but our adult self is not quite strong enough to prevent us from all the pain. So even though we have all these strengths, we have all this insecurity. We freak out when we try to be in a relationship and all the rest, and we have performance anxiety and low self-esteem and all and codependency and so many things that we have to deal with. So the truth is that if you've been through a lot of abandonment or even some abandonment going through life, you have to be an even stronger adult than you already are. It puts the onus on you to develop your adult self even beyond what you already are. You could be the CEO of a large company, and yet your adult self isn't strong enough to take care of your own inner child. So, but it's the truth, and there's no shame in that. It just means that your inner child is very needy. And that's it, not nobody's fault. That's just the way it is. So you have to become an even stronger adult self. So if your adult self is saying, but I don't know what to say or do, I'm not strong enough, that's the dilemma. And that's why the exercise of doing a dialogue makes the adult self stronger. Not at first. It takes time.
Yeah.
If you do the exercise once, you've done yourself a favor. If you do it twice, a favor. But if you do it for 3 months, your adult self starts to get a little wiser, a little more able to say the right thing and do the right thing. And you don't just do a lot of words, you also do actions. You have action plans to try to help your inner child, be happier. Things that will make your inner child happy. Things that aren't self-indulgent, like eating a piece of chocolate cake, but things like taking a walk which is good for your metabolism or something like that, where you do something helpful and constructive. But as you do the dialogue, as you develop a new relationship with yourself, that weak adult self that doesn't know what the heck it's supposed to do gets stronger. In my case, when I went through my abandonment, my therapist, whose name was Norman Moore, who wrote the book, Big You, Little You. So he got me started on this. And I started writing a dialogue, and my adult self was so weak. My inner child was so obnoxiously crying and unconsolable, and oh my God, my inner child self was a mess. And my adult self was like, blah, 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 don't worry, I'm here. And the inner child would say, go away, you can't help me. And I had nothing. I couldn't help her at all. But I kept at it. And then I had this amazing moment when I realized, I realized that she had been in childhood a very obese child and had been rejected. And my adult self was supposed to love her. Well, I didn't. I hated her. She had caused me embarrassment, made me all alone. And then all of a sudden, my adult self thought, the poor thing, she must have felt so isolated, so rejected as this severely obese child, the only one in her class who was the only one in her school who was obese like that. And so I imagine putting my arms around her. I actually hugged like 3 pillows. And I imagine doing that. And then I sobbed and sobbed. And that was the very beginning of me actually loving my inner child. I don't want people to feel discouraged, but that took 3 months of work. That was 3 months and sticking with it.
Yes.
That I'm not saying that that kind of thing will happen for everyone, but I will tell people that to begin a dialogue is to discover that your adult self is very weak compared to what you need to do. And that as you do the dialogue, it gets stronger because it keeps trying. It's like physical therapy for the brain. You're exercising the muscles, you're working it gradually. Yeah. And it takes a while.
It takes a while. Oh, wow. I love that. I love that you could share also your journey, because I think a lot of people try a little bit and they get discouraged or disappointed that they couldn't connect the two, and they give up and they don't have hope. So I think this could give a lot of people hope too. Yes, and it is an experience that you have.
No, I was going to say it's also something a little discouraging to tell people, because I know that abandonment recovery tools can help everyone.
Yeah.
It can help you.
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to sell. But you have to do this for 3 months every day. And you have to do this 5 days a week. And it's a lot to ask people to do. So to have to tell people, oh, do it for 3 months. It's just not an easy sell. The program it works. It's effective. It's an ongoing program, but you have to stick with it. You have to make a commitment to it.
Yeah, that's true. Especially if people are going through a breakup and they're very raw, and maybe withdrawal stage or shattering stage, the first stages, and they cannot just go through one day, and they maybe think, oh my God, I have to do this for 3 months. Yes, it could be like, I can't bear it. I want something quick, but there's nothing super quick.
I mean, the quick message for people who are in the kind of pain that I've been in, that I mean, many people have been in, when they just are so devastated. The quick message is acknowledge the abandonment wound inside of you that has now been burst open, and then realize that recovery is possible. You will feel better. You might have to work at it, but you will feel better. The pain will help you in the long run. You will get stronger from this if you use certain tools. It's going to take 3 months and you have to stick with it, because it might be too discouraging to push that at first.
Yeah.
But the good news is people need to know what their most hopeless moment, there is hope. There is hope. And you know, life is a journey and every step is good. So even if today is horrible, this afternoon might be a little tiny bit better. And tomorrow, maybe you'll make a bigger leap. You know, it isn't, it will be a journey where the pain changes because you're using tools, you're using a program.
Yeah, I love that. And talking about self-sabotaging and stuff, you say that abandonment can lead to more, or can lead to self-abandonment. Can you talk more about that? Because that is not very self-evident.
Well, Ibeaa and I are exposed to so many different examples of the way people self-abandon, the self-sabotage, the outer child behaviors. And because in our workshops, people bring up all of these issues and we work on them. But what it is that as adults, we really can't be abandoned. We're too old to be abandoned because we can take care of ourselves. We can feel abandoned, but we can't really be abandoned. We can take care of ourselves. Children can be abandoned. They can die. But adults, not so much. But we can abandon ourselves. And that's what we tend to do. So let's say the most important thing to me growing up was to see myself one day as an author of a novel. that I wanted to write a novel and that I wanted to be a writer and write a novel. And that was so important to me. And I went to college and I studied, writing, and I got a lot of tools. And then life got busy and I got married and I got caught up in other things and I never wrote my novel. So you could say that in a way, I have a dream that I abandoned, that I kind of abandoned myself. So that's a very mild example. A more frequently heard example is, let's say it's very important to me to stay trim. And I only look good when I'm trim. And I want to look good. And it's important to me. But I love potato chips. And my greatest pleasure in life is ice cream at night. And so the immediate gratification of having, like French toast for breakfast. I guess I'm hungry right now telling you these things. But the immediate gratification of all the foods that are, let's say, my favorite foods, those things call to me because I'm not all that happy. So to have those pleasures is like, wow, that's so great. But by eating all those foods, I don't stay trim. So you could say I'm abandoning myself because that it's so important to me to stay trim. So, if you were to ask my inner child, how do you feel that Susan doesn't keep you trim? How do you feel that she's let you gain so much weight and that she eats so much food? My inner child would say, and I know that this is what she would say. She would say something like, she doesn't care about me. I'm not important. She knows how important that is to me, but she would rather just do what tastes good, and she just does whatever feels good, and she doesn't care about me. She abandons me over and over again because she knows that I don't feel good about myself and I feel bad about myself. And I have feelings that go all the way back from when I was rejected. And she does this to me. So you can see that there's a whole part of us that can ignore what our inner child wants so much for us to do to take care of her or him. And we give in to the need for immediate gratification. And we let the outer child take over. And the outer child is the part that, eats the cake and the ice cream. Or the outer child is the part that talks about our friends behind their back and then gets in trouble because nobody trusts us. And then that makes the inner child feel so sad. Or the outer child is the part that never goes to the gym, even though signed up for yet another membership, but never goes there. Or the outer child is the part that overspends or that procrastinates. Outer child procrastinates. You have a PhD and you have to write the dissertation and it's never going to get finished because the outer child keeps coming up with ways of postponing it. The outer child is the part that avoids, that procrastinates, that overdoes it. The outer child is the part of the personality that sabotages your most important goals and makes you commit the act of self-abandonment. Because if you ask your inner child, what do you want? I want to be special. I want to have a PhD because it'll make me feel better about myself. I won't feel really special unless I achieve something that I can be proud of. And I want to be trim and I want to be healthy. I want to be healthy in my body where I do exercises and get out in the fresh air. When you have a relationship with yourself and you tune in, you find out what you really want. What your inner child, what you inside, what you want more than anything in the world. And then you get that, then you give that to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your outer child wants to procrastinate, wants to avoid taking care of something, wants to, shop and gamble and drink. Your outer child has,
Yeah.
a very strong will.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I think everyone will recognize themselves, me too, into that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's brilliant how you divide the inner child and the outer child. So you can, if you're going to blame any of these two, it's going to be, I mean, blaming the outer child, not in an aggressive way, but just putting it into that part of you, and then just staying with the loving and with the tender and vulnerable emotions of the inner child with the adult self, right? And then, yeah, and I think I read also that the outer child, I don't know if that's true, can, it's like it has a lot of energy and rage, maybe that is directing it towards yourself instead of outwards. Is that true? Or no, it's just a way for the outer child to manage and to self-soothe because of the emotions that doesn't know what to do with them. Like why?
Well, I think what you said is true. I mean, there are so many angles of looking at this, and it's complex.
Yeah.
Freud didn't even divide. His id is the combination of emotion and behavior, stimulus and response, emotion and reaction, whereas by dividing inner and outer child, I'm suggesting to make a mental separation of the two, the emotion, the feelings, and then the behavior, the automatic behavior, the habit.
Yeah.
So there are so many ways of looking at it, and what you just suggested, both things that you suggested, they're both true.
They're both true. Okay.
But the outer child, the word outer, it means that here you have a desire for pleasure. You're on the pleasure principle.
Yeah.
And you want pleasure, you want the easy answer, you want to reduce stress. So procrastination and avoidance work because let's not deal with that now, later. Let me relax for a minute. No, I'm not doing it yet, later. So it's all about reducing tension and increasing pleasure. So the outer child is about taking what feels good in the moment and then acting it out by not doing something or by doing something such as drinking or whatever it is that will make it feel better. Whereas the inner child, the relationship between your adult self and your inner child isn't based on the pleasure principle. For instance, I have a perfect example. I had an inner child, this is going back about 20 years, who wanted a dog. I mean, this sounds so ridiculous, but this guy I had as a client, I had him doing the exercise, and his inner child wanted a dog, and he would say to the inner child, "Oh, that's so nice that you want a dog. I really appreciate that. We live in an apartment. We're not allowed to have a dog. But thank you for telling me that," and worked with this inner child, but the inner child would come back with, "I want a dog." So, and it's because this client had a hard time in relationships. He had a lot of work to do before he'd be ready. He got so insecure and too needy and clingy. He sabotaged relationships. So his lonely inner child really wanted a dog. So guess what? He had to move. He finally said, "Well, let me just see if there's something I could afford." And it meant that he needed a better job. And he found a job that was higher paying and where he could work overtime. And he managed to get one of his uncles to help him get a mortgage, which was very hard for him to do. But he knew that he wanted a dog. So he got a very small house, and got a dog. And now he loved this dog and worked. I mean, it became the center of his life, but you can understand that sometimes it takes a tremendous amount of effort to give your inner child what it needs most, which is love.
Oh, yeah, you need to
But
take action.
he took action, and it was a lot of work, but he did
Yes,
it
a lot of work.
because
Yes.
he was so motivated. He never would have done all that work, getting a better job, working overtime, getting his uncle to help him out. I mean, he never would have done that if he didn't have the inner child begging for a dog. But I mean, that's an extreme example.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, excellent. I love all the examples that you're giving. And so, Susan, I ask a group that I have that are anxious attachment and other things that, well, I told them that I was going to talk to you, and one of them gave me like kind of a question or a paragraph to you, so you can tell her what are your thoughts or idea. Maybe I can read it to you. I don't want to miss this. Can I just tell you? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So she says, I'm not afraid of abandonment itself. I see it as a compassionate, clean situation compared to my biggest fear, being trapped in a covert abandonment. This is when the person is no longer there or no longer wants to be, but stays anyway. I witnessed and experienced what I call covert abandonment from a young age toward me and others, and it left a strong mark on me. Now I find it very difficult to distinguish whether somebody is present because they want to be or if they already abandoned me, even if they occasionally remain, normalizing abandonment and disconnection. For me, normal signs of connection or abandonment are no longer reliable. And it terrifies me to see that covert abandonment can stretch for decades. So she's very afraid of being in a relationship with somebody that doesn't want to be there. And she be very hyper vigilant and seeing like if that person really wants to be there or not. Like that's her biggest fear. And I'm sure a lot of people can identify with this. So I don't know what are your thoughts or both of your thoughts.
Well, there's a lot of terminology in attachment, the work on attachment theory and all of that. And I use, a whole other terminology for my work, but the two, are very compatible. But so I'm not sure what I'm about to say is only covert abandonment. I think it covers other territory. But one of the most common things is to wonder if you're really being loved, if what you're feeling is mutual to the other person.
Yeah.
And one of the most devastating things that can happen is that you're in a new relationship. Let's pretend it's new and it's a year old, and you're in the back of a taxi cab in New York City, and you're on your way to dinner with this person, and you reach your hand over and you put your hand on his hand. And usually he takes your hand and clasps your fingers. So you do this, and this time he doesn't really do it. It's sort of like he goes, like there's no affection in it. Yeah. And you have an immediate feeling that he's lost some love feelings for you. And you try to dismiss the feelings because you don't want to be insecure and needy. You want to be your confident best, but you can't, your heart sinks anyway. This is so common. It happens in long-term marriages where you all of a sudden realize that your partner is not interested in sex anymore. They go through the motions, but with very little passion. And you realize that you've lost ground, and you're not being loved the way you need to be loved, the way you want to be loved. It happens in friendships where you just enjoy getting together with this particular person. You're so excited. They're not as excited. They don't reciprocate quite the same way. And at some point you think, I don't think they really like me the way I like them. Maybe I'm not enjoyable enough. Maybe I'm too much of a downer. So, the shame comes in. Maybe I'm not sexy enough. Maybe I'm not important enough. Maybe I'm not successful enough. All the different shame messages that we have to explain why the other person didn't take our hand and give us tenderness. So the fact that the person who wrote that is so touching, it puts a lump in my throat to realize what she's talking about. She has a history of this, and then she feels it again in her current life. The feeling that someone's with her, but they're really not with her. And it's so painful because it could be completely untrue. The person might be 100% there. But the fact that she feels that awful feeling of maybe she's not being loved after all, maybe it's not mutual after all, maybe it's not real. And I'm sure feeling that way affects her behavior and reactions and her spontaneity and all of that, her overall level of confidence. It probably affects her in some way, which may in turn affect the way the other person feels about her. So it becomes such a vicious cycle and so painful, because then you say, oh, and I'm the one sabotaging my relationship, and you're blaming yourself. So there's so much subliminal shame. The only thing that he or she, I think, said that I might not agree with is when she said, I don't have a fear of abandonment, because I think that what's the unconscious part of this is the fear of abandonment. I mean, what she's really saying is, I'm not conscious of that. What the way it comes through to me is differently. I'm not afraid of being physically abandoned. And that's significant. That's good that she has that. But it's the fear of being emotionally abandoned. And that's what abandonment fear is, the fear of being emotionally abandoned. So she at least knows nobody's going to leave her on the doorstep.
Oh my God.
Which is good. She has that, which is good, but it's not so good because it leaves her feeling that could be emotionally abandoned.
And being like hyper vigilant, afraid to look for any sign, and shame in the background of am I good enough or not? And most of us have that. And how to deal with this? How to deal with that hypervigilance?
Yes, the hypervigilance and the shame. First of all, those are universal. Well, hypervigilance is a reaction to an emotional situation. The shame is universal. We all have a lot of it. We don't talk about it because we're ashamed of being ashamed. So we don't talk about it. We talk about it more lately than usual, but it's not something that's part of everyday conversation. But the hypervigilance is involuntary also. But what it's a sign of the fact that you're in a situation that your adult self is looking to the other person for security. And then your adult self has to make a realization that it's no one else's responsibility to make you feel secure. You are responsible to give yourself security. And if you're in a relationship where you're looking to the other person to make you feel secure, you have to absolve them of that responsibility and make yourself responsible. And you have to then say, there's something in that person who's not making me feel secure, or there's something in me that's interfering in my feeling of being secure. Regardless, it's my responsibility to give myself security. And the only way I can do that is to give myself the love, the reassurance that I need and not look to the other person. I have to take them out of the loop. I can still have fun with them, be with them, go with them, be generous and warm and caring, but I can't make them responsible for my sense of security. It has to come from me. And in order for me to do that, I have to have a better relationship with myself. I have to build a relationship with myself.
Yeah, that's right. We go back to the inner child work, and the relationship with yourself.
If I may just share, I think that's very, having that dialogue with your inner child is very important, because as I said, like 4 years ago, I went through this heartbreak, and then just recently I'm also going through, not as big as before, but when I check my dialogues from 2020, it's like, oh, I saw a pattern. Like, oh, okay, so when this person does this is my reaction. So it helped me, have a better relationship with my inner child, because it's telling me what my triggers are. And it's not really about the other person. It's really about me not having that, strong relationship with my inner child. So that really helps. The dialoguing really, really helps.
Yeah, because once you learned what your triggers were, then you knew how to love yourself. Because then you knew, oh, this triggers me. Why is that? Oh, this happened to me, and this is me, and and you give yourself all of that love and support and, reassurance that you're there, that you're with yourself. You've got it covered.
Yeah, and then you can tolerate more the uncertainty. If this works out or if doesn't works out, you know that you're going to be good and safe within yourself. And then I think the hypervigilance can be lowered when you really know deep down, I can be okay because I have me. That sensation, but it's like a felt sense. I think it's not just a rational thing.
Well, the hypervigilance becomes a prompt, and the prompt is, "Uh-oh, I'm doing it again." And that becomes a prompt. I have to remind myself once again. He or she is not responsible for my security. I'm being hypervigilant and I'm worried about every little thing, but that's a reminder, a prompt to tell me that I have to take better care of me, that my self-love needs to be stronger. I need to tune in and create a dialogue or something like that with myself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're running out of time, but this has been amazing. Thank you both. Is there anything else, Susan, that you want to add for the listeners about going through recovery from a breakup or abandonment wounds? Anything else?
Well, one thing is that we have a lot of help at abandonment.net. Ibeaa and I are there to help people and respond, and we have so many things. We have workshops coming up, and we just have an awful lot of help. We have audio tapes, videotapes. The videotapes guide you through the 5 different exercises of the Ikeru program. We have 4 books translated in other languages, including Spanish.
Yeah, del abandono a la sanación. You should check it
out. Yes, that guide you through the 5 stages of abandonment. That's one thing for people to know. Abandonment recovery changes your life the minute you get it started with it. It's an ongoing program. You're in just like when you get into AA, you're in recovery, for life. Well, it's like that with abandonment recovery. You're in recovery. From that moment on, life gets better. Because you get more in tune and you get more human and more connected to other people. The other thing that I love to say at the end is that you don't have to fix things perfectly. You just have to make little tiny improvements.
Yeah.
So in your relationship with yourself, it might be you might lack self-esteem and you don't love yourself very much. In fact, you hate yourself. You don't have to fix that perfectly. You need to make a slight improvement. The littlest bit of improvement can make the difference between making a new friend, or, the littlest improvement can spell a whole different set of behaviors and experiences in life. So when you realize how messed up you are and how screwed up your life is, you don't have to be too worried, because you don't have to fix it and make it perfect. You just need, through abandonment recovery, you'll make a little improvement, and the improvement, little bit by little bit, you don't have to make it perfect. It starts to work with a small improvement.
That is very comforting. Thank you, Susan. And I'm going to link your website, but do you want to name your website or websites? I think you have two.
Well, there's one main address, and that is, you could do it outerchild.com. No, outerchild.net. And or abandonment.net.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But abandonment.net will get you there. It'll get, because there's an outer child page, and you'll have access to the 200 item outer child checkoff list. And
yes, we have a lot of resources that are great. Okay. Yes. So thank you so much again for your wisdom, for sharing all of this with such generosity. Thank you, Ibeaa, also for sharing your experience. And have a great day. Thank you both.
You too, Natalia. Thank you for a beautiful interview.